Hey guys, Ron here, and it's award season time. We recently entered a pretty sweet decade, and 2020 is a cool sounding year, so hopefully it's fine. Probably won't be, the world is kinda dying, but Pokemon is thriving. I thought it would be a cool idea to go back through the last 15 years and talk about which Pokemon were the most iconic during each year. Kinda like an award, except nobody gets anything. I'm gonna be using Google Trends, the Cerebi archives, and other resources to see which Pokemon were most talked about, popular, Google searched, and influential each year. I'm not saying any of these Pokemon were the best during those years, just that people were talking about them, and they helped the franchise stay relevant during those times. Basically, what are the Pokemon that represent each year? So we're gonna start all the way back in 2004. Unfortunately, archives of the online Pokemon community before then are hard to come by, and I didn't want to rely on just asking people, so we're gonna begin during the middle of Generation 3. I picked the two most talked about Pokemon in 2004, Jirachi and Munchlax. The film Jirachi Wishmaker just came out the previous year and was coming out in the rest of the world. But what really made it iconic was how this was the first year Jirachi was given out in Japan every summer during the Tanabata Festival, the festival Jirachi is based on. But the thing that was getting every fan hot and bothered that year was Munchlax, the Generation 4 Pokemon that was revealed 2 to 3 years before Diamond and Pearl even came out. This guy was exciting. The transition between generations felt less abrupt. The existence of future generations weren't just teased but explicitly acknowledged. Like Togepi before it, this thing became a star for a few years. That's 2 stars for 2004. 2005 is also the year of the Munchlax. It even appeared in games like Pokemon Dash and Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, 2 very contrasting spin-off games in terms of quality at least. But I'd say the most popular Pokemon at the time were Rayquaza and of course Deoxys. Emerald was just released, giving a bigger role to Rayquaza, and the film Destiny Deoxys gave every kid the desire to witness a real fight between the eternal rivals Deoxys and Rayquaza. Till this day I have a huge soft spot for this film, and Emerald is the game I've played the most by far. I think 2005 was a huge year for my identity as a Pokemon fan, so I can confidently say I remember these 3 Pokemon being at the forefront of the fandom. 2006 was a year. In Japan, Diamond and Pearl came out, but it did not in the rest of the world, so we were bombarded with so many Gen 4 Pokemon that weren't even available to us. And it was awesome! The hype season for Generation 4 was the longest out of any generation. While Japan got the games, we got Lucario and the Mystery of Mew, one of the best Pokemon films and the beginning of the era of Lucario. During this time, the Pokemon that defined the franchise were Weavile, Mime Jr., Bonsly, Mew was back in our minds, but Lucario took center stage, and this ain't the last time we'll be seeing him. 2007 was finally the year the rest of the world entered Generation 4, and with that, Lucario was on top. Darkrai was a close second considering his film, which came out in Japan at this point, was attracting a lot of attention. Dialga and Palkia were naturally up there, and continued a trend of box art legendaries being at the top during the year they were most relevant. Manaphy's film came out in the US, and Manaphy was being distributed, so it received a fair amount of good treatment. Naturally, the Sinnoh starters were in the spotlight, and Munchlax, while fizzling out, was enjoying his last year of fame. But a strange anomaly was the popularity of Mudkip, slowly creeping up through memes, but it, alongside Kyogre, were only 2007 honorable mentions. The first year where we get a ton of Pokemon in the public eye. 2008 was a bit chiller, with a lot of the same popular Pokemon from the previous year, but it also marks the 3rd and final year of Lucario sitting in the #1 spot. Super Smash Bros. Brawl came out this year and propelled Lucario into general video game stardom. Darkrai, Dialga, and Palkia are still riding the wave of the previous year's release, but a noteworthy anomaly is Mudkip, who became absurdly popular due to the general "do you like Mudkips" meme. Ever since then, people have been liking Mudkip. Shaymin is starting to become super relevant with its film being released in Japan, and Chimchar and its family is gaining more traction due to its story in the anime, while Piplup will perpetually be relevant as long as the Diamond and Pearl anime series airs. 2009 is the year of Platinum's worldwide release. Giratina's everywhere, and it was pretty scary. Darkrai was there too because of its member card event, and Rotom was chillin' with its newly acquired forms. What a spooky time it was. 2009 was like Halloween all year round. But the most mysterious of all was Arceus. Arceus was becoming the legend in the Pokemon world. We wanted to know more about this guy, but little did we know the answers wouldn't really be that accessible. We had distribution events and a film, yet we were still not satisfied. Regardless, I'd say Arceus was the most iconic Pokemon of the year. 2010 though was a remake year. Those are always fun because old Pokemon are relevant again. Lugia was the king of late 2009 and early 2010, while Arceus was still hanging on with more worldwide distributions. Celebi was making a resurgence due to Heart Gold and Soul Silver's release, but its appearance in Zoroark Master of Illusions, which was only out in Japan at the time, helped it place in the top 3 of the year. Suicune and Ho-Oh, along with the Johto starters, became household names again, and kids who grew up after Gen 2 got to fall in love with these lifelong friends. Rotom's forms are still here, dominating the metagame, and Unknowns are slightly more relevant than they've ever been since Crystal. If 2009 was like a spooky but fun October, 2010 was like a vibrant and comfy November. 2011 is the year Generation 5 began throughout the world. There was a reason I was using seasons metaphors. Unova, with its changing seasons, included Victini, the first Generation 5 Pokemon in the Dex. Celebi was still prominent with the previous movie out in the US and such, making Zoroark a household name. It wasn't as big of a boom as Lucario, but they were still compared to each other. You can't have a new generation without the box art legendaries becoming icons. They were showcased in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, for crying out loud, only a month before 2011 started, and since the Japanese versions of Black and White came out at the tail end of 2010. It gets super confusing when a game is released at the end of a year in Japan and the beginning of a year worldwide. Because if it wasn't clear, I'm using worldwide statistics for this video, not just popularity in the US or West. Snivy definitely wins among the starters for its smug leafness, but Oshawott and Tepig are still up there. Zorua shares some popularity, while Minccino and Pansage get some odd showcases, putting them in our minds for a few short months. Even the Vanillite line is grabbing some attention because people either love or hate the fact that we got an ice cream Pokemon. Hydreigon was dominating the metagame and appeared as a general threat in Black and White. I totally remember it appearing in my mind whenever I thought about battles in 2011. 2012 was a year in which Pokemon Black and White 2 came out in Japan and worldwide, the final games to have separate launches. Kyurem was definitely a big deal, not to mention the distribution of Genesect. Keldio's film gave this little dude a minute in the spotlight, and the usual suspects Zoroark, Victini, and the box art legendaries were making their final rounds, cause the following year would shake everything up, and made the idea behind this entire video make way more sense. 2013 was the first year in which the hype season leading up to the new games and generation was responsible for propelling various Pokemon back into stardom. Now that these games were coming out everywhere at the same time, we could all celebrate together whenever Pokemon were teased or new features were revealed. And this was even more relevant because one major feature revealed in August 2013 was Mega Evolution. Charizard was once again the most popular Pokemon in existence, Mewtwo was a close second with its Mega being teased before anybody else, and Sylveon was making everybody scratch their heads. Fans online were asking whether or not this was Mew 3 and if Sylveon was a bug or flying type evolution. Lucario was the most popular it has ever been upon X and Y's release, alongside other Megas like Garchomp. Greninja started its reign in 2013 too, although it wasn't top dog or top frog until the following years. Genesect was still fairly relevant considering Mewtwo's new form was revealed in its film. Meloetta is here too. Froakie wins in the starter department, I'm just relaying the facts, but the others alongside the box art legendaries were spoken of throughout the land, especially with the speculation of a fairy and sound type. People thought it would be a thing. Blastoise, Venusaur, Tyranitar, Gardevoir, Blaziken, Ampharos, and Mawile would become extremely popular, and new Pokemon like Aegislash, Goodra, Talonflame, and Noivern were the new kids on the block, and they were quickly kicking butts and taking names. Even Gogoat enjoyed its time at the top since it was revealed way before all other Pokemon that would dominate Generation 6. It was a crazy year, guys. It really was the year that got a lot of people back into Pokemon, but it isn't the final year Pokemon received a huge resurgence. You know what I'm talking about. But not yet. 2014 was another remake year, baby! And the year I became a Poketuber during the summer leading up to Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. But it wasn't the only game Nintendo fans were anticipating. Starting this year, Mewtwo is relevant basically every year. But goddamn, was it a crazy time when its return to Super Smash Bros. Was announced. Charizard is here for the same reason, but Greninja wraps up the top 3 as it rises to the top. Talk of a Primal or Mega Rayquaza throughout the second half of the year, and the eventual reveal of its Mega makes Rayquaza 4th on this list, with Primal Groudon and Kyogre right below it. Gardevoir is on everybody's team at this point, Deoxys is back in action with a Delta episode, and Pachirisu makes an uproar at the World Championships, alongside Garchomp. Diance's film debuts, and let's not forget about the Hoenn starters. Sceptile and Swampert were given some Mega love, as well as Latios and Latias, but the most out-of-left-field Pokemon resurgence was that of Ammonite, thanks to Twitch Plays Pokemon. Lord Helix is now a worshipped deity among a small sect of Pokemon fans. In 2015, we had our first gameless year in a while. It felt barren and people were barely playing Pokemon, but when they were, Gardevoir was used. That's why the most talked about Pokemon at this point were anime related. Along with the fact that people seem to have been drawn by Ash's X and Y journey, the anime was more popular than the games that year. Greninja was rising to superstardom at this point, so much so that by the same time the following year, it became the most popular Pokemon in Japan. Later that year, Zygarde's forms were revealed, making people interested in the games again by anticipating a Pokemon Z. At the end of it all, Hoopa's film was the most exciting thing that happened that year, but Hoopa was unusually less popular than most mythicals were. But 2016 was the craziest year on record. It was nuts! For very understandable reasons. It was Pokemon's 20th anniversary, Pokemon Sun and Moon were announced, hyped up and released, and Pokemon Go was launched, creating what is known as Pokemania 2.0. So we have to split this year into 3 parts. Part 1 is for the Pokemon who are on everybody's minds because of Pokemon Sun and Moon's packed hype season, and that includes our number 1, Mimikyu, who is apparently the most searched Alola Pokemon, and basically stole every fan's hearts upon its reveal. Second is Rowlet, who became an instant meme, and while Litten actually had more Google searches upon reveal, Rowlet ended up having more searches by the time the games were released. Rockruff was a dog, so immediate popularity, plus it was heavily promoted and a bunch of people thought it was a 4th starter for various reasons. Solgaleo and Lunala aren't immune to box art legendary popularity, and Magearna had a few months of fame, especially since it was the first Gen 7 Pokemon revealed and was a huge part of Volcanion's movie. Salandit had its own reveal trailer, and Popplio was slowly gaining sympathy, but one Pokemon that climbed to the top once the games were fully played was Cosmog. Nebby himself became such a meme that, well, I don't really know. It just became a meme and still is. And till this day I'm not sure if Alolan Exeggutor was popular and iconic or just heavily memed. It's here regardless. Among the Part 2 Pokemon who were naturally popular during this year, Greninja was number 1. Ash Greninja and its eventual inclusion in Sun and Moon were just icing on the cake of this Pokemon's monumental existence. Volcanion had its movie, but like the other Gen 6 mythicals, this Pokemon's notoriety was relatively lackluster. Zygarde was crushing it though, with its inclusion in Sun and Moon and the climax of the Gen 6 anime, along with Aegislash, Goodra, Talonflame, Hawlucha, Noivern, and pretty much any Pokemon appearing in the Kalos League. Sylveon was an exception. It placed 5th overall in the Japanese popularity poll that came out that year. Part 3 of 2016 are the Pokemon who are back in the hearts of the general public. Pikachu, Eevee, Mewtwo, the Kanto starters, and pretty much any other Kanto Pokemon were spoken by people who haven't uttered a Pokemon in almost 20 years. I don't think any other franchise, company, or even person has had such a successful 20th birthday. Kinda makes 2017 less impressive in comparison. After having years filled with more than 30 Pokemon in the spotlight, we went back to less than 10. Pokemon Ultra Sun and Moon had such a controversial hype season. New Pokemon were announced, but they weren't talked about that much considering they were Ultra Beasts, Necrozma being the only one that became iconic. Its role in the games and what is considered one of the hardest boss Pokemon in the franchise, along with a battle theme that rivals the most iconic Pokemon tracks, Necrozma was a worthy number 1. Lycanroc was almost tied with Necrozma, and before the games were released, it was number 1 since its Dusk form got a bunch of coverage, being the first thing we even knew about these games. Marshadow was finally officially revealed and featured in the Pokemon movie I Choose You, which got people back into theaters to watch a Pokemon movie. So yeah, this was something worth mentioning. And Mimikyu is still popular and on every form of Alola merchandise. 2018 was another year for bringing old fans back into the franchise, and it wasn't the last. Meltan was a huge surprise. For a day, nobody knew if this was a glitch or a new Pokemon. It was the latter, and the rest is history. Pikachu and Eevee became the mascots of our life, and Zeraora was there for like a second. Charizard is still popular, and Poipole had something to do in the anime. It had some merch, and James Turner rejoiced. And finally, 2019, where Pokemon girls were as popular as the Pokemon themselves. But I digress. The Gen 8 reveal was the first time where all 3 starters that were announced for the new generation were equally memed, for completely different reasons. Sobble is pathetically cute, Scorbunny is energetic as a jackhammer at 2 PM, while Grookey is a rambunctious and curious fellow. They're just such good little boys. I love them! Wooloo was the face of the Pokemon community and all of its complaints for many months, and Yamper, well, Yamper was Yamper. Another dog to enjoy. But 2019 was full of Detective Pikachu memes, so Pikachu alongside any other Pokemon that appeared in that film had a boost in relevancy. Same for a new group of Pokemon once Sword and Shield were released. Snom became our new god, Toxtricity seemed to be the breakout star, Dragapult was a unanimously beloved pseudo-legendary, Hatterene was our new Gardevoir, and Dracovish was the most surprising addition to dominate the metagame. But there were a bunch of other new and old Pokemon that became very overused in competitive battling. And that brings us to today. What Pokemon will be 2020's iconic Pokemon of the year? We'll know in 365 days. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like so I know you want more, and subscribe if you haven't already. Check the description for all the music I used, the t-shirts I made for you guys, and my Patreon where you can help out and get rewards like seeing my videos days before they're made public, which you can also get by clicking the join button and becoming a member. Make sure to follow me on Twitter, and I'll see you guys very soon.